It has been more than 2 years since President Obama signed into law the massive overhaul of the country's healthcare system. Its final passage came after a heated year-long debate on Capitol Hill and in town halls across the country. My next guest has penned a book about the legislative battle and his personal experiences trying to get healthcare reform passed. It is called Fighting for Our Health, the epic battle to make healthcare a right in the United States. Its author is Richard Kirsch, someone I've known a long time in New York politics. It's a pleasure to have you in the studio.
It's great to be with you, Liz.
So this, you know what's the first thing I have to say is when I read this, I was like, oh yeah, like something, oh yeah. It seems like it happened so long ago. It must seem that way to you.
You know, I relived it writing the book, and I'm talking to people about it all the time, so it's still very real to me. And the fact that we see, you know, it being debated so vigorously in the presidential election, it's coming up with the Supreme Court, so it actually feels pretty recent to me.
But all of the sort of the details like Stupak Amendment and all of these fights, and it was so vitriolic and so heated, and so many elections actually turned on it at the congressional level, which we'll get to in a second because you write tellingly about some things here in New York that occurred. Right. But I do want to just, a couple of things sort of mechanically about how this happened for you. You took a year? Is that how long it took you to do this?
It didn't take quite that long to write the main part of it. I spent about 6 months. I was lucky enough to have a fellowship at the Roosevelt Institute to work on the book. And a lot of it is memoir. It's my remembering what happened and prodding my memory by looking at records and newspaper articles. But I also did 120 interviews with people around the country, because tremendously what the book is about is how ordinary people fought for their health, how their compelling stories about how sometimes their loved ones died because they didn't have health insurance, or they were forced into tremendous financial difficulty. And talking to those people and hearing how we organized them, the whole idea was to organize their voices in a strategic way to make change and to get Democrats to become champions, to get weak-kneed Democrats to actually support the law. That was wonderful, and so I love talking to those folks.
But you failed on the public option. I mean, there for a while it was, and it must be a very bitter pill for you. There's a chapter in there about pushing various people, Chuck Schumer, I mean, various people are engaged, and yet it just doesn't go anywhere in the end. Right,
in the end it didn't, and it was killed by conservative Democratic senators, first Ben Nelson, and finally Joe Lieberman. There's a chapter called Lieberman's Revenge, and Lieberman killed it because he was mad at progressives for defeating him in the Democratic primary in 2006. He just wanted to get back at people. That's what a vengeful guy is.
And now he's not running, so you don't have an opportunity to take him out. He's doing it for you.
Right.
Just another word on this is that I had read one review, and I thought it was pretty apt. It's unabashedly from the left. I mean, you make no bones about it. This is a personal memoir, a personal experience that you had pushing for something that you really supported. So in other words, if you hate Obamacare, this is probably not the book for you. Or maybe you want to know how it happened and this is the book for you. But it is, you come at it with a point of view.
Absolutely. You know, one conservative person who read it said, the right should read this because this is still a great example of how you make change. And, you know, the part that's neither left nor right in this is the part that shows how ordinary people, if they're organized strategically, can still make change despite the odds. But yes, I mean, this is based on my values, which is that healthcare is a right, and it's crazy to be in a country with this kind of riches. We spend so much on healthcare, and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people die every year because they're not insured.
And also another thing that refreshed my memory is that people might recall all of these very vitriolic town hall meetings that members of Congress went home and experienced sort of at the height of this debate. And in a lot of cases, it wasn't just people who were Democrats or people who were Republicans. Everybody got an earful. And in the cases of, for example, Scott Murphy, who is no longer a congressman, but he was an upstate congressman in New York 20, right across the river, you played a very large role in that, actually. You had personal sit-downs with him that are very telling, and you found him cold.
Yes, I'd never met Congressman Murphy because he was elected when I was in Washington for a year. And I sat down as the only personal lobbying I did, but I wanted, as my congressman talked about it. And the first thing I noticed, he was wearing a very expensive, this pink Hermes tie. And all he wanted to talk about was cost. And at one point I told him a story about how my daughter, when she moved to Massachusetts and was uninsured, got good health coverage, and she has a chronic medical condition because of Romney Care, which is pretty much the same as Obamacare. And he didn't acknowledge me. He didn't say that's good. He simply said, well, did Massachusetts save any money? Which, by the way, it's saving money. And I felt this guy was really cold. Turns out all he cared about was politics. He voted against the law originally, the bill originally, because he was worried about backlash politically. And the way we got him to vote for it at the end in March was because the Working Families Party, when a neighboring congressman, Michael Arcuri, decided to vote against the law, and Arcuri had gotten elected with 10,000 Working Families Party votes. Murphy had got elected with Working Families Party votes. When Arcuri said he was going to vote against it, the Working Families Party said, we're going to run a candidate against you.
Yanked their support from him,
Yanked their support and said, we're going to run a candidate against you. And when Murphy saw that, he realized that if he voted against it, the same thing would happen to him.
But ironically, they both lost.
They both lost. It didn't matter. When you look at Democrats who voted for the law and voted against the law, a lot of them still lost. It didn't matter what they did. It mattered more that Karl Rove and all scared seniors, got a lot of seniors out to vote, and it was a bad year for Democrats. You were damned if you do, damned if you didn't. But I want to say one thing. A lot of congressmen knew they were taking a risk, and they still voted for it because they thought it was the right thing to do.
And some of them survived.
And some of them survived.
So let's talk about what we find ourselves in now. This has not gone away, this issue. I mean, this is a multi-year issue. We'll be talking about it for many years to come.
Right.
It is an issue in this election, obviously, because the president who signed it into law is up for re-election, and because a challenge to the individual mandate, which says that you must have health coverage, right? You must have it, or you would be subject to a penalty, is being challenged in court, and the U.S. Supreme Court is expected to rule in June, at the height of when people actually start paying attention to this. So what role do you believe this issue will play in the presidential, but then perhaps more importantly, closer to home, in the congressional races?
Right. Well, in terms of the presidential election, if, as is more likely than not, Mitt Romney is the Republican nominee, the issue is going to have to disappear, because Romney Care is like Obamacare, and Governor Romney should be really proud of this law. 99.5% of kids in Massachusetts are covered, 95% of people, costs are coming down, people love it. And so he's going to be in an awkward position attacking Obamacare. The president will just make a fool of him if he tries. At the congressional level, though, I still think we'll see right-wing groups, Karl Rove and all, trying to make it an issue to scare people. It's not clear whether it'll be successful. Democrats have a really good defense. The law is really being effective already. Millions of young adults, including one of my daughters, is covered because of Obamacare. Senior citizens are paying less for prescription drugs. And if we get to 2014, we're going to see Americans free of the big worry they have right now, which is if they lose their job, if they want to retire early, they'll lose their health care if they have a pre-existing condition. So the Democrats have a good story, but they got to tell it.
Yeah, and also I think that the Tea Party is not as strong as it once was, right? So perhaps this won't be as much of an issue because it was a real driver for them. But on the flip side, the base isn't as excited about Obama as it had been, so perhaps it will be a wash. There is an implementation issue at the state level. There's a number of them for Obamacare. Obamacare, we're like actually internalizing it. For healthcare reform, it was the right who actually
like
coined that.
Obamacare because we should be proud of it. And the president made history, and he's going to save tens of thousands of lives and change the whole country in a good way. So
okay,
I'm proud
fair
of
enough.
it.
So we will use it. There is something called the healthcare exchange, for example, that the states need to set up sort of a bazaar, if you will, so people can access healthcare, which they are now mandated to do. We don't have one.
Right.
Either we create it at the state level or the federal government steps in. I mean, we're going to have one way or another. We do not. For some people might say the Senate didn't want to do it because they didn't want to codify Obamacare. And yet the way that we're going, I'm not sure. I mean, what is your opinion of how the Cuomo administration is handling this issue?
Not as well as they could be. And this is, again, an irony. In Massachusetts, they did these exchanges very well. They're sure that there's no foxes guarding the chicken coop.
Right.
So that means no people in the insurance industry are allowed to govern the exchange, because the exchange is going to decide which insurance companies provide good enough quality care at a low enough cost. But there's not clear language like that in the governor's bill. The other thing in Massachusetts under Romney Care, there is a very aggressive role for this exchange to get lower prices, to get better quality care. And the governor says we're going to study that. So New York should do it. New York has a proud history of leadership on health care. It was one of the first 2 states in the country to do the child health insurance program, which is nationally. It's expanded Medicaid. It's done a lot of other great things, and managed care protections. And that was done under the governor's father and under Governor Pataki. And so Governor Cuomo should step up with a stronger law. The Assembly, which for years pushed that, should be doing that. And the Republicans should stop playing politics and instead focus on providing affordable care for small businesses and individuals who are struggling with high healthcare costs now.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, Richard, but no one could say about you that you do not have a strong opinion on this particular issue. I want to thank you very much for coming in. The book is called Fighting for Our Health, The Epic Battle to Make Healthcare a Right in the United States. It has been called very readable for a policy tome, and I would agree.
Thanks a lot, Liz. Good seeing you.